those of you who don't know me, or if you haven't been keeping up with what's going on in my life, my name is Tracy. I used to come to this church. Technically, I still come to this church when I'm in Colville. So this is my home church when I'm in Colville. I was here for many, many years. I think for is it 10 years? Just around that amount of time. And then in 2015, I moved to Coventry because I went to study in Warwick Uni. And then I've pretty much been there ever since. But after I graduated in 2018, I did an internship with the church that I'd been attending called CLM Church, Christian Life Ministries. And then I was offered a full-time job. So I've been working there with CLM for the last 4 years now, as of this summer, mainly working with students, helping them as they come to Coventry Uni, Warwick Uni. There's another uni called Nexus. And to just get plugged into church life, for those who don't know Jesus, seeking to reach them and help them have a life-transforming experience while at uni that goes beyond just academic learning and growing, but actually encounters with God that change the way that they move out of university. So one of the things I got the opportunity to do this spring was I went to Rwanda, and I actually came back with a little gift for you guys that I thought you could hang on your little notice board at the back over there, because I know it tends to be like a missions type of notice board. So I will present, Marcus, you can have this. I'll give this to you guys. I don't know if we do the whole handshake and everything. So that's just a little gift for you guys to say thank you, because you were part of supporting my experience in Rwanda financially, and I know also some of you were praying for me. So I really appreciate that. So I've come back today to kind of report on the trip, share with you a little bit about what I learned, some of the things that we did, and how it is that the trip kind of shaped me. So that is why I'm here. But before that, I love a good quiz. I love a little fun facts, all of that kind of stuff. So I've got a few things that I would love for you guys to try and guess. So first of all, where is Rwanda if you were to guess? Feel free to just shout it out. Africa, fantastic. Regionally, which part would you say it is? Middle? Easty, Middle Easty. Middle Easty of Africa. Yes, very good. It's it's in the east, so you were right with the east of Africa, kind of going towards the bottom, but it's a landlocked small country surrounded by Tanzania, as you said, Burundi, Congo, and where is the other country that I cannot seem to remember? Let me just see if I've got it. And Uganda. So it's a very small country. How many people would you say are in Rwanda if you were to guess, population-wise, roughly? 5 million? More? Not quite. 5 million, 20 million, it's somewhere in between there. 15, very close. I'll take that as the final bid. It is 13.5, just around there, 13.5 million. So it's a small country, but it's very densely populated. So good guess on that, guys. What would you say are the 3 top languages? 2 are a bit more obvious, fantastic. English is one of them. Good guess, safe guess. French, awesome. And then there's another one, which I don't know if you'll be able to guess, but fantastic. My mom, she knows Kinyarwanda. And the bonus one that some of them speak, which is the language my mum and I speak. Can anyone guess what that would be? Swahili. You guys know us. Fantastic. That is an additional language that they speak. So English, French, and Kinyarwanda. And the last one, what is Rwanda popularly known as in terms of based on its landscape especially? What is the title that it's normally called?
A country of 1,000 hills.
Yes, that is exactly. It's called the Land of 1,000 Hills. And it's called that because it is very, very hilly in many different places, lots of valleys, some mountains. It has some lakes. Some more Saharan type deserty feel here and there, but for the most part, it's a very beautiful country full of lots of hills. And just some other things about Rwanda, it's a country that's driven a lot by agriculture, both in terms of the people, but also in terms of their income. They make a lot of tea and coffee, but also they make a lot of their income through tourism. And another interesting fact about Rwanda is that it is very, very clean. I had heard about this with my hearing, but I went and saw it with my eyes. It is very clean. The like 2 bits of rubbish that I saw were while I was there. It was so interesting to see. And funnily enough, they don't have that many bins around. So clearly the people are very great at seeking to keep the country clean together. They have this like cleaning month. At the end of the month, the last Saturday of the month, the whole country comes out and cleans the streets. So that's very, very interesting to see. So how did it all start, or why did I decide to go? So it started kind of in January for myself, but for our trip leader, who is Kieran, who is just the guy with the hat over here, he'd been to Rwanda in 2019 and also, I believe, in 2022, and then this was his 3rd time in Rwanda. So he already had a level of rapport with the people that we were going to connect with. And so he kind of brought this as a thing to our church, CLM, to see is there anybody else that would want to accompany him as he goes on this other trip. But the reason for me that I decided to go is during January, we do 21 days of prayer and fasting as a church where we're seeking the Lord for lots of different things, seeking to draw closer to the Lord. And one of the things that I'd shared with our little group that we were praying with was that maybe next year I would love to go to Kenya and spend like a month there or something like that. And so I was thinking like maybe my line manager will let me do that. And then the Rwanda trip was advertised the following week. And then one of them said, what about Rwanda? Why don't you go to that? And I was like, no, too much happening. I'm too busy, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, I'll only go if I'm asked. And I ended up being asked by Kieran, one of the group leaders. And so that kind of felt like a God moment of like, I would have just kept low key and wouldn't have gone. But because of that, but also because I have a growing heart for African nations, and to see the kingdom of God in its fullness there, I wanted to explore that sense of call and see if it is something that is for me. And really, it's ultimately like, why not? There's a great opportunity here to go. But the way that we prepared as a group, so there were 9 of us within the group, and the way that we prepared is we had a couple of meetings, like 4 or 5 meetings before going to Rwanda, where we would meet up, talk about the practicalities of like vaccinations and what are you going to pack and all of these kind of things and documents. But also we had a bit of a Kinyarwanda language lesson with some random people who are from our church. And they came and they shared some of the cultures and customs that we might not be aware of, but also shared with us a little breakdown introduction to the language. But also one of the things that we were doing is we were journeying through this book called When Helping Hurts by Steve Corbett and Brian Fickett. That's all about how you can partner to kind of bring about poverty alleviation without hurting yourself or others as you do it. So often, we're very driven into kind of bringing material relief or bringing money into like places where there is poverty. It kind of makes sense because within the book it says a statistic that like around 40% of the world is considered like poor, so they live on less than $1.90 or $2 per day, which is like £1.60 somewhere there. And so it kind of feels like we're responding to a clear need. But actually, this book kind of goes into helping us to have a different perspective about what poverty alleviation is all about, because Rwanda kind of fits within those stats of like 40% of them live on less than $2 a day. So yeah, just trying to bridge some of those gaps. And so what the book talks a lot about is the fact that poverty alleviation is first and foremost not just about like material relief, or bringing finance, but actually at the heart of poverty, the true poverty, is that all of us have a broken relationship with God, with ourselves, with others, and with creation. And so in seeking to alleviate poverty, ultimately what we're trying to do beyond the physical needs that we're meeting is we're trying to bring repair in some of those relationships that are broken. And ultimately, only Jesus can do that. He's the only one who can repair us from the inside out. And so there's this next slide with the chart. This is some of us in our weekly meetings as we meet. So as you can see, they're quite a complicated chart
but actually what it's showing some of the things like the fact that when we have a poverty of self, we can either have like a God complex where we think we are better than we are, we think as ourselves as the God of our lives, or actually we can go on the other way, we have low self-esteem and we think we have nothing to offer, nothing to bring. We can have poverty of community where we're either self-centered and just about us, or we can go the other way where we're exploiting others and abusing others. Poverty with like creation, so we can either like be lazy or be workaholics, or we can think like the ground is cursed and all of that. And then poverty in terms of our relationship with God is we can deny God's existence and authority, or we can be very materialistic in how we live, or worshipping false gods. So lots of different things that we talked about there to do with that. And I think that really helped to frame the trip helpfully, because then it means that we're not these people who think we've got something to offer and we're coming to give, but actually for both sides there's something of a repair going on in terms of our relationships with ourselves, our relationships with God, and our relationship with others. And then the other thing that the book talked about as well is the fact that when you're seeking to bring help, there are kind of like three levels. There's relief, that's like the emergency, stop the bleeding, they can't help themselves at this point in time, like let's say when you have a tsunami happen. So we can bring that. And then there's rehabilitation, which is kind of trying to help people restore themselves back to where they were pre the crisis happening. And then there is development, which is all about that part of really working on the repair of relationships between ourselves, God, others, and so on and so on. So those are just some brief concepts. So we had that in mind as we were going. And I'll just read this quote. It says, if you go back to what poverty is, what is poverty? Poverty alleviation isn't just about fixing circumstances. Poverty alleviation is a process in which people, both the materially poor and non-poor, move closer to living in right relationship with God, self, others, and the rest of creation. It is about helping one another discover that we are image bearers, that we have tremendous value as human beings, each called to be a steward of our resources and opportunities. So it's just that idea of the fact that all of us have something to offer, not just those people who seemingly on the outside are materially poor. We all have gifts, abilities, we're all made in the image of God, and so we all have something to bring. And as we bring those things to the table and seek to serve one another in that way, we're reconciling relationships with ourselves, God, others, and creation, and so on. And what that really made me think about, a little bit later on, I'm going to share more about this specific trip, but it made me think about 2 Corinthians 5:16 to 21, which talks about like the ministry of reconciliation. And I thought that fit really well with some of the things that we're doing when we're seeking to be missional, but also when we're seeking to just live our day-to-day lives, is that actually we're proclaiming the fact that God has come through Christ to reconcile us, to bring us back together, to tear down every dividing wall that stands between us and God and one another, and to make us new and to make us a new creation. And so I'll just read that. 2 Corinthians 5:16 to 21, it says, so from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though we once regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. All of this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. And I think this scripture is really significant for some other reasons that I'll share a little bit later on, but maybe some of you know the history of Rwanda. They had a genocide that happened in 1994. So over 3 months, 1 million people were killed horrifically because of some kind of tribal differences that happened that were influenced by kind of like colonial rule, political disruption, and all of this kind of stuff. And so we were going to this country of peace and reconciliation because they've come very far from where they've been. So it's been 29 years. They were actually commemorating 29 years while we were there. They do that every year for 3 months. And we, as those from Coventry, were coming from the city of peace and reconciliation, which some of you might know that based on the Coventry Blitz that happened, I think during the Second World War, that also brought a lot of disruption, but out of that, Coventry was known as the City of Peace and Reconciliation. So it's the City of Peace and Reconciliation going to the country of peace and reconciliation, which was really, really powerful. But here, as we look at this passage, some context for you, Paul was writing to these Corinthians who, although like he'd kind of helped to establish the church and all of that, they looked down on him quite a lot because his message didn't seem as powerful because he was poor. When he came to preach, it didn't seem like he was preaching that powerfully, like he came, as he says sometimes, in fear and in trembling, and he also seemed to be in constant suffering and in prison. So they kind of looked down on him, and then they elevated some of these other kind of apostles or preachers or what have you, who were a bit more wealthy, had a bit more prestige, had a bit more position. But actually Paul was kind of exhorting them even here that we don't regard one another from a worldly point of view where like you only have something to offer and to bring because of what you have or because of the position that you hold, but actually you have something to bring because Christ is in you, because Christ has put his message in you, and Christ is the one that calls us all, no matter which class or background or what have you that we come from. And I thought that was relevant because again, for us coming from the West, it's not like we are the ones with the answers. We are the ones who have it figured out. And we are the ones in a position to kind of impact Rwanda. But actually there is an exchange that can happen, that they too have been given the ministry of reconciliation. And as we break it down through Christ, from that verse we see we have a new perspective regarding no one from a worldly perspective based on what they have to offer. Based on the haves and the have-nots, and the outward appearance, as it was mentioned so brilliantly today. But actually we regard them from a godly perspective of the value and the identity and the dignity that they have. Secondly, through that we see that we have a new identity. So we're a new creation. The old has gone. And so as we go out to Rwanda, we're not just doing some relief and all of that kind of stuff, but we're going as children of God, to other children of God, seeking to partner together to bring the kingdom of God. We have new relationships, so we're reconciled to Christ, and also new purpose and destiny. Like all of us have been given the ministry of reconciliation once we come to know Jesus. And so we see, like, I'm going to talk a little bit like through the trip and some of the things that were happening and kind of where I saw moments of that. So this was day one. This is when we arrived. We left Coventry at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and then we arrived in Rwanda, which has an hour difference, at 7 p.m. the next day. So we were exhausted, but when we arrived, we were met with the worship team who were practicing, which was awesome because the next video I'm going to show is we got a moment to just worship with them. That's the first thing that we did on arrival. Yeah, so that was a really powerful moment. Like the first thing on arrival that we're going to do is we're going to consecrate ourselves and come before the Lord in worship and unite in that way. And I just saw the power of God in that. And there was just such a great sense of the presence of God in that place. And then here you go, Land of 1,000 Hills. This was the view from my room. Very, very lovely, cute little pool. That is Kigali. That's the capital. That's where we spent most of our time while we were there. And then on day 2, we were with Ambassadors Football. Ambassadors Football is an organization that has existed since I think the 90s, I believe. And they're called Ambassadors Football partly based on that scripture of like ambassadors of Christ. Because what they do is through football, through sport, they seek to bring the kingdom of God. So they mostly engage with young people, sharing with them the gospel as they train them in like football and other sports. But also some of these children get sponsored in different ways in terms of like being able to reintegrate back to school. But here it was an interesting scene because we met with like 250 children on that day. So they run these like Saturday day camps type of things where any child can come from the community and they spend some time playing football and they're trained by different coaches for a couple of hours. So it's a great way to engage them beyond what other things they could be doing during the weekend. But it was interesting because it was a bit sad to see some of the children had amazing footwear and they were doing well, but others not so much. And so one of the things that we thought we would want to do, but we're considering, is like to see how it is that we can help the young children. So this is now coming back from the trip, to be able to have access to appropriate footwear. Because as you can see, the ground is like, it's okay, but it's not great, and especially when it rains and all of that kind of stuff. To just have the dignity to be able to come and to play sports with your peers and to be comfortable is something that we wanted to do. But on this day, we spent time with the coaches training some of the children in sports. We also donated some kit as well for them to be able to play. And then in the afternoon, there was a business workshop for AGR. AGR stands for Ambassadors Group Rwanda. So it's Ambassadors Football in Rwanda because it's a global organization. So some of our team, Ayomide over here, and Ben in the middle, they basically helped this organization think about how they're functioning more from like, not necessarily like a business for profit, all of that kind of perspective, but how they're scaling, how they're operating. So they brought some questions around like SWOT analysis, like strengths, weaknesses, and tracking metrics, because they're having so many children come in, but they have no way of actually figuring out who's with us, who's not. So they help them to kind of think about how they're currently functioning as a business, as an organization, and how they could do better. So that was one of the things that we did. I wasn't involved in that necessarily. And then on day 3, we went to the church. The church is actually in the hotel that we were staying in because the church owns the hotel. So the church is incredible. They have 4,000 different locations. Interesting fact, if you were to go around all of their churches, it would take you 65 years. If you were to go to one each Sunday, just huge how they're functioning. So the church itself is called, or the body is called ADAPER, which is I think a French, I can't remember the French translation for it, but it's like Pentecostal Association of Churches in Rwanda. And so yeah, they have a big body of churches and they function in incredible ways, serving the community with like hospitals and schools, helping people in agriculture develop business and all of that. But on this Sunday, we mainly got to be part of the Sunday service. As you can see, one of our group members there in the middle, Danny, led worship team with the worship team. She sang one of the songs in Kinyarwanda, which was a powerful, powerful moment. Again, just seeing that sense of like unity of language, and when we like extend ourselves to kind of engage with those individuals through their language, like how much it unified us. But there was just such a sense of joy in the place as we kind of shared together in that. And then I got to preach on that Sunday. I preached on Romans 12. And then in the afternoon, as you can see, very teary for me. So in the afternoon, we got to go to the Rwanda Genocide Memorial. So they have quite a number of these memorials in Rwanda, but this is one of the biggest ones. It's in Kigali, and there they have 250,000 of the 1 million or so people that were killed that are buried here or commemorated here. And we got to walk around the museum and just to see some crazy, horrific bits of information about the impact of the genocide, how it all started. And one of the things that showed kind of that brokenness of identity / not valuing people was like there was this Hutu 10 Commandments, which talked about like in Rwanda there are the Hutus and the Tutsis at the time, and they were the ones that were fighting. So the Hutus were kind of killing the Tutsis. So there was the Hutu 10 Commandments about basically just degrading the Tutsis and all the ways in which they are less valuable, less worthy to be married, that they're basically subservient to the Hutu people. And you just see the brokenness that can happen when we don't value one another and don't value those relationships with one another. So that was a really like emotional time for me that I'm still kind of reeling from. But great to have stood in solidarity with some of our Rwandan brothers and sisters and kind of going through that. That would have been very difficult for them. And then Kwibuka is what it says at the back. That just means remember 29. So they're remembering 29 years on from there. And those are just some of those people that we were journeying with in that group there. And then on day 4, we got to do something a little bit more fun. So this is all about reconciliation with creation for me, because we got to go to somewhere called Fazenda Senga, which is like a country club. So we had a rest day. We could do whatever it is that we wanted to do, but a bunch of us decided that after spending some time with the Lord and resting and all of that, we wanted to go out and just experience the other fun sides of Rwanda. So we went to this country club, rode quad bikes for the first time. That's the country club, very beautiful. Grace, one of our group members, went on a horse ride. Some people did zip lining, I did zip lining, and we did archery. So lots of different things to kind of restore us. And I think that's a really helpful part of missions as well, is being able to rest and to enjoy and to see what the country has to offer in other ways. And then on day 5, we went to this ball making project. So as mentioned, Ambassadors Football, working with children and using lots and lots of football. So one of the initiatives that they started, or one of the branches of their business side that they started, is ball making. So these individuals in their kind of aprons or whatever it is that you want to call it, overalls, they hand make these balls. So it takes them a day to make one football, but in like a week or a month, I think, I can't remember, they could make like 20 footballs, and they make something like $3.25. Doesn't seem like a lot, but actually kind of sustains them for where they are, and enables them to put food on the table. But actually through this program as well, we got to hear some stories of like people being repaired in their relationship with God. There was one individual who was a drunkard and abusive within his family, but the moment he started kind of journeying through this ball making project with those others that were there was a lot of restoration in his own relationship with God that happened, and a lot of change that happened in him. So again, it's a business, but the impact that it is having in terms of transforming lives is colossal. Sorry, I'm flying through this. It's because it's just hard to capture all that happened in a short time, and I'm just mindful of time. But of course, you can always come and ask me questions. And then we got to go to a school that's right next to where the ball making project was happening. This is also a video because I wanted you guys to capture and see the joy that was like in that space as we were together. Yeah, that beat was literally just a guy on a keyboard, and he just put the like 2 times on or what have you. So very, very fun to see that happening. And then one more video. Yeah, so that was the kids welcoming us into the school, and they were basically singing like, we're happy to see you, we're glad you're here. So lots of honor happens in Rwanda, particularly for like leaders and guests and all of that. And that was something that some of the group members, all of us, like had to grapple with, is the level of like good treatment that leaders and guests can get, that sometimes kind of like, it's so different to our own like paradigm and how we function in terms of we still honor, but it's just to a completely different level that sometimes can feel like it brings some kind of inequality, should we say, or it's very hard to put into words, but that was one of the things. We were honored so much everywhere that we went, to the point it feels like I'm a little bit worshipped here, it feels. But it's not. That wasn't the case at all. It was just that's the way the culture works. That's how they function. And then on day 5, Daniela, who's just here in the purpley lilac top, led a worship workshop. So taught a lot about how we engage the congregation in worship and teaching them to lead people in worship to God. So she led on that, and I was part of that kind of with the Q&A and just helping people to understand the value and the purpose of worship. And this was with the worship team that we did this with, so really equipping them to continue the work that they're doing within the church. And then day 6, this was some training of coaches, basically, that was happening. So some of those in our group, along with support from others in team, are especially apt at like sports and sports coaching. So they were equipping the trainers to be able to go and not just coach but disciple the kids there. And we also had a listening ministry. It sounds a bit random because it's not something that we're necessarily used to, but this was a really great space actually, because it was an opportunity for those who were in church on Sunday, those who wanted to come, and they would just be listened to. So they could share about anything that they wanted to, any stories that they had. And some people shared some funny, light-hearted stories, but actually some people shared some really sad and heavy stories. But to have a space where they were acknowledged and cared for and listened to was one of the things that we did. And one of the people coming out of that said, I'm telling you this because I trust you. So it's powerful to see how in such a short time some people had developed or sensed that they could trust us to be able to share some of their stories, which was powerful and impactful. Day 7, we had a young adults fellowship and panel where we got to share about some of the differences or similarities in UK and Rwanda in terms of like challenges young adults are facing, whether in mental health or in career or in following God and remaining faithful to Him. There are so many twins in Rwanda, which is why I love this picture, because these are 2 twins that I just wanted to take a picture with. But so many twins in Rwanda, which is interesting as well. And then this was us traveling to another region called Huye, which is in the southern province, and we got to try some local foods. This is called bruschette, which is like roasted meat. So traveling to and from different locations was a fantastic opportunity to get to talk more with some of the people who were accompanying us on the trip, getting to know them, building those connections, encouraging one another, edifying one another in that kind of way. And then this was another significant day for me. So this was on our way to where we were traveling to. We stopped off at this place called the Village of Hope. I believe there are around 6 of these villages in Rwanda, but these villages have both perpetrators and victims of the genocide living together. And here we got to sit with them, and they shared with us some of the stories of what they had been through. So on this left, it would be your right, my left. You can see these 2 gentlemen in between the lady. And when they first came up, they were like holding hands. And what had happened was the gentleman on the left-hand side, or your right, was the perpetrator of the gentleman on the right-hand side, your left. And basically he tried to kill him. He, I think, killed his brothers and then like fled. And there was just a really tragic story that was being shared there, but they also shared about how the material that some of the church had brought to this village to kind of help them repair, kind of equip them to know how to reconcile, how to work through forgiveness and healing and repair of their relationship. And so that was a powerful moment where, again, the 2 Corinthians 5 passage came to life of like the ministry of reconciliation, because they ministered to us about reconciliation through hearing some of their stories, and we got to hear a few others, and just to see the power of Jesus to free people, to bring identity back, and to restore relationships. That was the whole village as well. Well, some of the members of the village there. Almost there. This is a school assembly where some of the individuals from our group got to share about prayer and the importance of prayer in our relationship with Jesus. And then this was another day where we got to spend time playing football and coaching with some of the young people in the community. And this is also a football academy. So for those in the football academy, they had all their school fees is like sponsored and paid for, and their like food is taken care of and all of that. And they invest in them in terms of football. So some of these guys have gone to like national levels to play football. So it was great to come and just spend time with them and work with them. And then here in the afternoon, we went on a random hike through a village. We just went for a walk and then ended up having like a bunch of village kids just follow us because they were intrigued, because obviously we're not common to their space. But a really powerful moment was John Paul, who's one of the individuals that we were with. He took a moment and just basically preached the gospel to this village. Some responded, and that was just powerful, because sometimes we think we have to wait for a platform or we have to get really deep into it. But it was just a moment that was beautiful of just, it felt like walking with Jesus almost in how he shared. And it's just as he was going through the villages, bringing the gospel of Jesus. And it was just such a joyful time. And then here we were at a local church before traveling back to Kigali. So this was the following Sunday. This is also a video just to give you a taste of like the atmosphere. Yeah, and in Rwanda, Christianity is the second, there's Catholicism, which is like 45% of the country, and then Christianity is like 35%, somewhere there. So church and God are a big part of Rwandan culture and life, and you really see how, like, when you don't have too many things to hold on to, God becomes the center, and your church community, that they're very communal in how they live. So again, that love for one another. And then on the way back, we got to go through a school where John Paul, his daughter, studies. So it was like a visiting day. We got to pray for her. That was a beautiful moment to just remember her and her friend. And then in the evening, we were back at their house. And a powerful thing happened there because as we were sharing, there were so many moments where we were in people's homes and just sharing with one another. But on this occasion, one of the things that we did that was really significant is like some feet washing, which sounds like odd, but actually it's the way of Jesus, but symbolically of these leaders, these individuals who have given so much to their church, to the ministry that they function in. Some of those on team got to just wash their feet as a symbol of like respect and honor and love and service to them for all their service to us. This was a rest day, market day. Yeah, as you can see, lots going on there. But the market was very organized, much more than we thought. And then finally, on this final day, we got gifted, as we have been gifted many, many times during our trip. They were very, very generous towards us. But there was a time here in the morning where we got to be part of a prayer meeting with some of those who had come to visit that church. So there were people from Sweden, Congo, Kenya, as from the UK, and also the Rwandese people. So that was a beautiful time getting to fellowship together before coming back. So I wish I could really sit down for hours and hours and share with you all that had happened, but that was a quick whistle-stop tour of all the things that were happening. But I think for me, some of the things that I learned is, first of all, I learned about that whole ministry of reconciliation through hearing some of the stories and seeing the repair that has happened in that country through all the horrific things that they've been through. I saw the power of Jesus to bring healing, to restore identity through some of the stories that I'd heard and esteem, and to restore individuals and also restore communities and even whole countries. That was one of the things that I learned. I saw it in a different way because it was live. It wasn't just a concept that you read in the Bible or you relate it a little bit to some of your own story, but it was alive. I learned the power of Jesus to bring unity and to bring people together for service. All of us were very different, from very different backgrounds, different languages, different nations, all of that. But we came together and were able to impact communities and impact one another through journeying together during this trip. So I saw the power of Jesus to bring people together for the purpose of kingdom impact. And ultimately, like, I think a lot of the learning is still happening. Like, I'm still reflecting, still taking in so much of the trip and what it is that I have learned. But I learned so much from my teammates, learned so much from those that were in Rwanda about generosity and fellowship and the power of community in like being at the center of all it is that you do. So that is just a little bit about my trip. Thank you so much. Hope you're not information overloaded by all I have shared. Sharon, you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it school?
Yes.
Is it a Christian school or is it?
Yeah, it's a Christian school. So it was a school linked to the church. I believe it was one of the church schools. Yeah. Yes. The Hutus and the Tutsis. Yes. Yeah, so there are three, it's a good question, there are three main tribes, Hutus, Tutsis and Twa, but the Hutus and Tutsis are the predominant one. The Twa are the forest dwelling, I think, group. But they are very much together now. Like, if you asked a Rwandan person, are you Hutu, are you Tutsi, they're unlikely to respond. They normally just respond and say, like, we are Rwandan. So on the back of their history, they really try a lot to not create those divisions, because it was those very distinctions and divisions that brought about some of the conflict that they had before.